Hey guys, Kevin Guzman for Flesh and Bone, Episode 3, Reconnaissance, and I was definitely looking forward to this episode. I know a lot of people aren't enjoying the show. I can totally understand that. And once again, of course, this episode is not aired yet, so if you've not seen this episode, do not watch the rest of this review, of course, because it doesn't officially air till, in 2 weeks. So, like I said, I'm trying to get through this quickly. I already started Episode 4. I will get that out quickly. But with this episode, I do have to say, this was probably my least favorite episode so far. I still thought it was a really solid episode. There were some really great things in it, but it was very much like the pilot, where there were things in this episode where I just couldn't take it seriously, unfortunately. I want to be able to take it seriously, but there were just certain points where I wasn't. However, there were some really great scenes in this episode, definitely. I do have some complaints with this episode, like I said, my least favorite episode, but I do really like the direction they're headed. Episode 4 of what I've seen so far is amazing. We'll talk about that, but let's just get into this episode. First of all, we see that reconnaissance means gathering vital data about enemy forces or features for an environment for later analysis, and that very much goes with this episode. We see Claire walks home after having sex with Brousseau. Of course, after almost having sex with Brousseau, of course, she didn't have sex with Brousseau because she threw up, and then he left, and Romeo sees her and is not really sure what happened to her. Now, Romeo is very underused in this episode. The most we get of Romeo is, one short scene with him and, not another character, and then just him giving looks the whole episode. I mean, that's basically Romeo this whole episode. Not that that was necessarily bad, it's just I really like Romeo as a character, and I think the actor that's playing him is doing a really great job, and he's, very quickly becoming probably my favorite character on this show. So, Bryan's then brushing his teeth, and we get a lot more over Bryan this episode. He's brushing his teeth, the man asks for his toothpaste, he then brushes his teeth with the toothpaste without a toothbrush, and he leaves. And Bryan then makes a call asking for Claire, and the woman says that she's not there, and he asks if she's absolutely sure, and she says there's no one by that name in this company. He then calls, of course, the American Ballet Company, and finally we get a name of the pregnant woman, Monica. Finally we get her name. Thank God we did, because I don't like to call her the pregnant woman. She answers, and we know how this is gonna go. We're like, oh shit, what's gonna happen here? I know some people might think this was rushed, but we have to keep in mind this is an 8-episode series, so they can't really slow anything down. I do think that's sort of a problem, but it's really out of their control. I mean, they made this an 8-episode series. They really couldn't slow down the story, and that's something I do like, is that they're not slowing it down. And this is something where I'm fine they didn't slow this down. The quicker we get to what we want to get at, the better. Basically, he asks how she's doing, and she says she's fine, asks how she could help him, and he tells her he's trying to track down Claire, and thinks she's part of the company. She asks what it's regarding, and she asks, basically, the woman says that Claire is, basically he realizes here that Claire is part of the company, and the woman says that Claire's a company member. He asks if she can give her her home address, and since he's her brother, and she says she doesn't see how she can verify that over the phone. He gives out her address from Pittsburgh, and her date of birth, and some facts he knows about her, just to prove that he is her brother. And Bryan is being both very creepy, but also you kind of feel happy for him, because you see that he really cares about Claire. There are some moments where it does seem like he wants to be a genuine brother, and then there are some moments where he's just really, really creepy, and they're doing a very good job with Bryan's character. You can definitely tell he's a very layered character. So, he talks about, like I said, he gives out a few facts, and he says he just got into town after a 9-hour bus ride back from Afghanistan. He'd really love to surprise her. Monica realizes he was overseas, and he says he's glad to be home. He asks if she can help him out, and she says normally she wouldn't give this information out. He says he could just head there with a box of chocolates, but that wouldn't be personal enough, original. He's obviously trying to guilt her into it, which was very smart, I have to say. I mean, what Bryan was doing was definitely a very smart strategy. Obviously, guilting her into it, that'd be the perfect way of doing it. So Monica then tells him Claire's address and says he didn't hear it from her. He thanks her and says he made her day, and she thanks him for his service. And he then heads to the apartment, and he basically plans on going to Claire's apartment. So right away, in this beginning of the episode, he has Claire's address, and the rest of the episode is us following him around. So, well, his plot at least. So everyone has rehearsal. Bryan then gets out a check, and Ivana then tells them to start the Grand Allegro in groups of 3. She praises Kiira and says everyone needs to be like her, and Paul then calls Trey out for acting gay. Hold the phone here. I thought that Paul was gay. Why is he calling Trey out for being gay? I don't understand this. I mean, we clearly saw Paul have sex with a guy in the first episode, act gay. Everything he said seems like he's gay, and why is he calling Trey out for it? It's just, I don't understand it. I mean, I get that you guys want him to act gay, but that's his personality. I mean, that just felt very, very strange, definitely. We definitely got back to the dickish Paul in this episode. Paul really seemed like a dick for a lot of this episode. And I think, you know, the actor that's playing him, he's doing a good job. It's just, it's hard to, sometimes I can't really figure out what they're doing with his character. So, Reggie gives Paul the signal that Toni has arrived, and he tells him some artists are born, some are made, and some emerge from an upside-down, deliciously kinky, terrifyingly mysterious force of beauty and wonder. He says these artists never stop speaking and dreaming. They bewitch and confound us, make us question ourselves, and lead us to our ultimate goal, which is transcendence. That basically is their goal at the company. He says they are honored to have Toni with them and says to make her proud, and Toni's a very interesting character. This is a very different style for teaching ballet, and I really like seeing that here. Paul tells Toni basically what to expect from all the dancers and what to improve upon, and I like that he kind of gave her a rundown. Ivana stops and tells them that they can always do better, and Toni then gives them advice and she tells them to take their shoes off and tells them to stand, and she asks them how they are. She says she's really excited to be there. She's been a fan of Paul's work for a while. It's an honor to work with such a distinguished company. She then tells them to start by simply walking around the space. This is really interesting. The way she teaches is kind of like how you teach a theater class, because I've been in theater classes before. I've taken dramatics and I take theater arts, and one of the things that we do is walking around the imaginary space, and I think it was really cool the way that Toni did that. But clearly the dancers are not into it. They're not used to this kind of method at all, and I really like seeing, you know, Toni's eccentric method. It's really interesting. She says if they feel like going in the opposite direction, to go in the opposite direction. She then tells them to stop, close their eyes, and breathe. And I have to say, good strategy. Honestly, what she's doing is good advice. I mean, it gets them focused. It warms you up, and then she asks them to hug a partner, which again is a really great trust exercise, because that gives you the trust. If you can hug your partner, you can have that confidence in them that they're not going to drop you, that they're not going to hurt you, and I think that was very smart what she was doing. But Paul, we can tell, is not into this at all. He obviously is very upset, just because he's probably never seen something like this before, and they're not used to it very much either, and he can tell that the dancers really aren't into it. So she asked him when the last time was they actually embraced another dancer, and when was the last time they felt yearning, lust, and jealousy. She asks what they're willing to let go and what they aren't willing to let go of, and Jessica comes in and Paul goes to talk to her. So Bryan continues to walk, and then he stops and sees children playing. Really creepy. Yes, it was definitely very creepy, and of course, you know, we get that sense that Bryan is definitely a pedophile. I mean, he's watching these children, and he's just ecstatic to see them. He's not acting like a father would towards a child or a brother would. He's acting like a straight-up pedophile, and you really get that in this scene. So Monica tells Claire that an interviewer, Kervin Voss, wants to meet with her and is going to ask her some questions, and Claire tells her she's a little nervous. Monica says to just be herself, and she says she has a sneaking suspicion she will have a great day. Now, this was one of my favorite scenes of the episode. Like I said, this was my least favorite episode, but this scene was definitely one of my favorites we've had so far, because we find out so many little pieces of information about Claire in this one scene. This is the scene where you realize we still don't know a lot about Claire. Like, we know things about her, but not enough. You know, we know as much about her as Voss does. And, Voss, I think, really gave the, really gave the idea of just the interviewer that asks way too many questions. I mean, he gets very personal very fast, and a lot of interviews are like that, and I think the show portrayed that very, very well. Voss starts the interview, asks her some questions, and we find out some more about her life here. We find out, her dad's a fan of the Steelers, but he's really not a fan of the arts, which is mostly why she probably took a year off of dancing, because her father probably wasn't okay with it. And her mom didn't pass away, and she doesn't know if she danced, and, that's quite interesting that we don't know that. I mean, we're assuming that, I guess, their mom left or something. I mean, there has to be something that happened there. We're gonna find out, definitely. But then when Voss asks her, she's been up, until she left the college, and she says it was a hiatus. It just wasn't possible to dance at that time because of extenuating circumstances. And I'm wondering if that was because her father told her not to. I mean, we know her father had a health scare, so it could have been that, but it's clearly something that she does not want to admit, and I think it definitely is very interesting, that every time someone brings this up, she doesn't want to admit it. So he says he's curious, as it doesn't usually happen that someone was at a school for 3 years, auditions for a company, and then gets into it. Now a piece of new work is being created for her. Yeah, that usually doesn't happen. So she starts to feel very intimidated. He asks her what her secret is, and she is just so scared, obviously. You know, she doesn't want to reveal these secrets. These are clearly something she wants to keep inside and doesn't want anyone to know. And I think it definitely is very interesting the way they did that in this episode. So Kiira then comes in, who Voss has clearly interviewed before. Obviously, we know that Kiira is the star. We used to be the star. He says she looks as stunning as always, and Kiira says she hopes she's not intruding. He says Claire and him were just talking about the proverbial dance of things, and Kiira then asks, basically, if, she asks if he wants to know a secret, and she says that, basically, that the season's gonna be simply incredible. He then talks about Toni is conceiving it in original piece, and says the special part is that she will star in the A cast. Of course, this is something that Claire did not know about, but of course she is making this agreement. You know, she's making this work out. This is clearly what Kiira wants. Like I said, she has her own agenda. I really feel what Kiira's going to try to do is actually try to remain in the B cast as well, just to upstage Claire. That's really what I think Kiira's going to try to do here. She definitely has a bigger plan than what we think she has of, and, you know, she says it has to be that way. She didn't want to disappoint her fans. She says Claire will star in the lead on the second night in the B cast. She says it's a brilliant strategy, and Voss says everyone will be excited to come. He knows he will. Kiira says a new discovery such as Claire is always exciting, and Voss says it is, and he asks if she's doing Rubies too. And Claire obviously is feeling out of place because these two are just talking away. They're not acknowledging her. I mean, they're talking about her like she's not in the room. So she asks if she can just, if, you know, he's done and if she should be going, and he says that basically he says he has enough. He leaves and says he looks forward to seeing what all the fuss surrounding her is about. And after Voss leaves, Kiira tells Claire that being prima is not only being able to dance, it's a specific attitude that she needs to learn. And I think it's good advice what Kiira is saying. I mean, clearly she's telling Claire you gotta be more confident, because Claire clearly doesn't have that confidence yet. She kind of fakes it, you can tell. I mean, so many times throughout the show, we've seen her, especially last week, in the last episode, she faked it. Because of the drug that Romeo gave her, it gave her that confidence. She clearly does not have it, and that's something that you definitely need to have as a dancer. Kiira clearly does have that, and I think that's one of the reasons why Kiira doesn't like Claire very much, because she's not very confident. She's not your typical lead dancer. She just doesn't have the qualities that they should have, and Kiira obviously is very upset about that. So Bryan continues to watch the children play. A woman asks him if he has a child there, and he says no. She asks what he's doing there. He says he's eating his pretzel that he doesn't have, and the mothers tell him it's probably time for him to get the fuck out of there. He then leaves. They call him perverts, and they can tell that he's just this pedophile. I mean, you can just tell that he definitely is a pedophile. So Kiira then practices a dance with Ross, and she's clearly high, and this was a very interesting scene with Ross here. Up to this point, I thought Ross was first gay, then I thought he had a crush on Claire, and then he was trying to get closer to Claire. Now there's this thing with Kiira. Very interesting here. Ivana says they should take a short break. They give her a 5. Russ asks her what's going on. She says she's fine. He says she doesn't seem it. She seems way ahead of the music. He feels like he's chasing her. She tells him to keep up, and he says she's using again. There's blood all over him. And he says for her to tell him he's wrong. He asks what's in the bag. She asks when she's going to let it go. It's pathetic, and she's clearly either married or engaged. She has like a ring on. We don't know if she's married, if she's engaged. I'm starting to feel maybe that guy was, the drug dealer, was actually her husband or fiance. I mean, clearly she had an attraction towards him. So, very interesting. And she says to stay on his own side. And then we get to this big scene with Claire. Now, I will say, this scene with Paul I thought was very well done. There was the other scene that I had a problem with. This scene I thought was great. I really loved this scene. Paul really gave off, the character that played Paul, the actor played Paul really gave off that, just really obsessive dancer vibe here. Paul stays with Claire, tells her he started the company in the back of an Italian bistro village on the corner of Perry West 4th Street. He was a waiter and worked such long hours his feet, more than they did when he was dancing 8 shows a week. I like this scene because you get to see more character development from Paul. We realize he struggled a lot, and it's taken him a lot to open this company, and obviously he kind of started from the bottom, and he hears the birds. Claire tells him that it's a nest. He obviously is very annoyed by them. I mean, they're just these birds chirping in the background. I think we've all been there, definitely. I mean, I hate it when birds chirp in the background as well. He says there was this payphone in the back near the bathroom. He started the company at that payphone. It was a far cry from his dressing room that was filled with flowers. He says every nickel, diamond, quarter he made went into the metal box for 3 years. He did not take smoke breaks. He did not take walks and barely took a piss. And he says she cannot conceive of the river of blood, sweat, and tears it took to build this company. And then we get to the big thing that's going on here. Why he's so upset is because whatever she did would, the fact that whatever happened with Brousseau, obviously we know that Brousseau was clearly turned off from what she did. Last night he was deeply offended to the point where he does not want to support the company anymore, which of course he was the chairman. He was the one that was going to handle money. So now they have a lot to deal with, and Paul's obviously very pissed. He says his company that he fought so hard to build all those years ago, he says he'd like her to think about it, and while she does, she wants him to get out of his sight. Finally, we get that line, we've seen it in the trailers, we finally get it here, and it really worked very well. I really like that scene. I honestly did feel bad for Paul, because this is clearly something that he's dreamed for years about. He's always wanted this to go so well. He's had, to work from the bottom, and Claire's basically ruined it. It wasn't necessarily her fault. It was her nerves and the drugs that got the best of her. So Claire gets dressed and leaves. She cries as she walks home. Obviously, she's really upset. Bryan then goes to a bookstore to see if Claire might be there, of course, knowing her love for books, and Daphne then goes to talk to Paul and Jessica. Now, this was very interesting with Daphne. Paul says he knows things are heating up. Jessica said it's a busy time for all of them. He says he knows he's about to broach a sensitive subject, one that they have avoided since he's brought her into the fold, and she asks if something is wrong. He says the truth of the matter is that in terms of institutional solvency, things have recently become dire, and Jessica says that the company is in a state of financial emergency, and if they don't find a quick solution, they may be forced to terminate a number of contracts, and obviously they don't want to get rid of her, but they might have to do that, because it's just, they don't have the money, and obviously Brousseau is going to handle money, but now he's not supporting them, so they have to do this all on their own, and she realizes they want to go to, and basically she realizes they want her to go to her father to beg for money. We realize that Daphne's father is very rich. Of course, we've known that Daphne is rich, but her father is very rich, to the point where he can give them $250,000. That's how much money they need, and Jessica says it's no doubt an inconsequential drop in the bucket with regard to her father. She says, with all due respect regarding her father, she has no fucking idea what is and isn't of consequence. She says she gets the money, she wants a guaranteed promotion to soloist, and Paul agrees. So he says he noticed how hard she has been working, and then we see that after she leaves, Paul says that this would have never happened if Jeffery was still there, and he clearly is very upset about it. He leaves, goes to and gets these flowers, and we don't know what he's going to do with it. We'll get to that scene in a minute, because that was the one scene that I was like, okay, no, I did not like this. But I do like this character moment with Daphne. Definitely some really great stuff there. The one character that I don't think they're utilizing very well is Mia. Yes, we got a really good scene with her last week, but she basically has nothing to do in this episode, minus one small event that takes place. Other than that, she has almost nothing to do. And she's Claire's roommate, and we know hardly anything about her. So, I'd like to know more about Mia, definitely. I think they can, give her more character moment, but especially this episode, we know basically nothing about Mia. And they're doing a very good job developing Daphne, and developing Paul, and developing even Romeo. They developed him very well, that's why I was fine that he wasn't in this episode too much, even though he is probably my favorite character. I just want them to develop her character more, because she's supposed to be the bitch of the show along with Kiira, and in order for us to, sympathize with her and see what she's dealing with, we need to find out more about her character, which I'd like to see. So Claire then goes to Danny, of course, the guy that Daphne works for, and she asks if Sergei's around, and he asks what she wants with him, and she says she'd like to just talk to him, and he asks if she's sure, and she nods. He leads her to him. Claire then goes to the apartment, and then Bryan then goes to the apartment and sees Romeo. And this is the only, big scene with Romeo here. He asks who he's looking for. Bryan says his sister, and he asks who his sister is, and he realizes he's Claire's brother, and the way that Romeo's reacting, I just loved. He almost was acting as if he was just, if Claire was this huge celebrity, and he was, really happy to meet her. I really love that scene. Just really great stuff here. But Bryan clearly is not interested in any of Romeo's story. In fact, he finds him pretty creepy, and Romeo says he's glad he served, and Bryan asks if he did, and he says he did, but not like how Bryan did. He did in other ways, and he says they're all serving something. And Romeo really seems like he's kind of going to be the moral compass for this show. He's going to be the one to give all the characters advice, and I really like that. He gets the door for him. Romeo tells Mia that Bryan is there. He asks if he needs any help, and she tells him he's glad he's there. He tells him he's glad he's there. He's 100% welcome. Mia's stretching, tells him to put his stuff with Claire's, and right away you can tell there's going to be sexual attraction between these two. This is one of my problems with the episode. This was extremely predictable. The second that Bryan met with Mia, I'm like, he's going to have sex with her. They're going to hook up, and Claire's going to walk in on them, and we'll talk about that. But Bryan's looking through Claire's stuff. She asks if he wants a beer. He says sure. He's clearly lusting over her. And then we get to this scene. Now, this was just, I don't know why they did this. Paul goes to this graveyard, and it's Jeffrey's gravestone. Now, you think he's gonna, like, cry or talk to it. No, he throws eggs at it and says, fuck you. Once again, I can't take him seriously in the scene. I was laughing at this. This was completely out of character. Paul seemed like he was upset that Jeffrey died. Why is he saying fuck you? It's not Jeffrey's fault that he died. We don't know how Jeffrey died, so why is Paul saying fuck you? I know they want us to take this seriously, but I would have much rather had Paul talk to the gravestone and have us find out more about Jeffrey, and less of Paul just throwing eggs at it. I thought that was really unnecessary. But Jessica is then with her daughter Molly, and this I really like too. We find out more about Jessica in this episode, which is another character that we know too much about. Jessica's not a main character, but she's just as essential as Paul that you'd think she was a main character. She's with her daughter Molly, who tells her what she did after school and then how school was. Molly gives her an envelope, and Molly then puts on Jessica's shoes, which the little girl who plays Molly is adorable. I mean, the way that she was just talking in the background, so funny, I loved it. But Jessica calls her ex-husband Peter and tells them that Molly's tuition was due on the 10th, and she doesn't know what happened this time. Clearly, he is not interested, and she tells Peter that Molly's his daughter, and I love the scene where she says fuck, and then Molly starts saying fuck. I mean, that was hilarious. I love that. So Claire's at the club. Sergei then goes to her. He asks how the ballet is going. She says she thinks it's going well. He says he thinks she'll do fine, better than fine. He says he truly loves the art form. And he tells her this story, and I really like this story of how when he was a young boy, he saw a ballet he initially didn't want to go to, but his mom insisted, and when he went, he was astonished at the dancer and the way she danced, and it was actually a really cute scene. I really like that. So Daphne goes to meet with her father, Chalmer, and he asks what she's thinking, what she thinks of the painting. She asks how he's been, and he says he's been very well. He introduces his colleague Maxwell to Daphne. He thinks that she's at Harvard, and her father says that Daphne's not at school. She danced for the company, is about to be promoted soloist. Her father says she will be in Cambridge and thinks of her ballet as merely a phase. He clearly is not supportive of her ballet. I'm sure that, you know, he enjoys what she's doing because it'll make him some money, but he clearly thinks of this as just something silly. He doesn't really see it as an actual career, which I can understand. I mean, ballet isn't really something that I think you guys, you know, if you want to as a career, that's great, but obviously he doesn't know about the, you know, the work and, you know, what the effort that they have to put into it, obviously. You know, his daughter's been working very hard, and he clearly is not supportive of her, and I can understand that because he doesn't really know, you know, what's going on in ballet until he sees it, but he needs to be more supportive, and I hope that Daphne can get him to be a bit more supportive. Definitely more supportive. Hopefully he's, you know, he's just as bad as Claire's father, because Claire's father obviously wasn't supportive either, and that's why I think this scene works so well, because by finding out the information about Claire's father, we realize that Daphne could end up going down that same path, and I really hope that doesn't happen. Although, of course, Daphne has confidence, something that, like I said, Claire doesn't have. So Maxwell says good luck with the dancing. He says he rarely sees her, and Maxwell seems happy that she's dancing. And then she doesn't ask him for the money. She just says hello, and then she leaves. So I don't know if Daphne's going to ask him for the money. We'll have to see. I mean, this is clearly something that Joanna and you know, not Joanna, Jessica and Paul need her to do, and she needs to do this for them. So we'll have to see what happens there. Claire then watches a dancer named Crystal dance, and when no one is dancing, she goes up to the pole and starts to dance. And I will admit, this scene was pretty hot. Not just because Sarah Hay is hot, but the scene in general I thought worked very well. The audience is transfixed by her dancing. I mean, this is a complete stranger, and she touches herself, she starts to strip, and she gets more and more confident as this scene goes on. You know, she kind of goes into a shock, and she kind of goes into her own world as she's stripping. I mean, she doesn't really make much eye contact. It kind of seems like this is her happy place. You know, this is kind of like what she likes doing, which is interesting. I definitely think it's very interesting the way she's thinking about that, especially because she's not very confident. But it seems like here she gets that confidence. She goes into shock, and they get her off the stage, so the next dancer starts, and Sergei then gets her car and says goodnight to her. Crystal says to Sergei that she has a proposition for him, and it seems like they're most likely probably going to employ Claire, which is great, because, you know, when you're a ballet dancer, you need a second job. I mean, you're not going to be there forever. If you guys have seen Smash, you know why, so I think this is going to probably be Claire's second job, and I think that's really great. I know a lot of people think this is stupid, but I really like it, because, of course, you know, Claire doesn't like sex a lot, but when she's here, it seems like she actually really is into it, and this is kind of her happy place, and it definitely is very interesting. So then we get to the end of this episode, which, like I said, was quite predictable. This ending could have been a lot better had we not had that scene with Mia and Bryan. This would have been a lot more interesting. Claire then comes home to find her stuff damaged, thinking Mia got into it. She goes into Mia's room to find Bryan and Mia having sex. She then leaves. Bryan runs after her. She tries to get away. Bryan grabs her, tells her it's okay. Romeo sees what's going on, clearly is worried. Claire then gives Bryan a shirt. They make dinner, and she tells him to put her pillows on the floor. She gives him a place to sleep, and then, this is the worst thing for Claire that could have happened. She obviously doesn't want her brother there. She then gets into her bed, says goodnight to him, and then she holds her ballerina toy tightly in herself, and there's, blood pouring out of her hands. So, obviously, she's self-harming, and Bryan is probably making her self-harm, and basically Romeo watches upset, and that's how the episode ends. So like I said, this was my least favorite episode this season, but there was some really great stuff in this episode. Like the interview scene, like the stripping scene, not just because Sergei's hot, I mean, there is that. They definitely picked a very good lead actress, I gotta tell you guys that. They definitely picked a very good lead actress for Claire. She is quite attractive. But what's going to happen between Bryan and Claire? I mean, I don't really know what Bryan wants. Does he instill love with Claire, or does he actually want to be a brother? There are points in the show where I do feel like he does want to be a genuine brother to her, but I'm not really sure exactly what he wants. We'll have to see what's really going on there, because we still don't fully know what's going on between Bryan and Claire. I mean, I'm assuming that he raped her, but I'm not really sure. Is Daphne going to get that money from Chalmer? Obviously, he's not supportive of the company, so it's going to be hard to do, so we'll have to see what happens with that, and if he can get her the money. We'll have to see if that works out. Is Crystal going to, get Sergei to try to employ Claire? I think that's where we're headed. I mean, it would make sense. This is clearly what Claire's into. She likes to strip. She likes the idea of it, and I think it'd be good for her. Why is Paul angry at, why is he angry at Jeffery? I mean, obviously, he threw eggs at Jeffrey's grave, and then we also find out that Jeffery died, in 2013, so this is someone that's died 2 years ago, and Paul is still very upset about it. I get that grief takes a while, but come on, you can't get over someone that died 2 years ago. Just pull yourself together, man. Seriously, you gotta do that, definitely. I thought Paul was definitely way too over the top in this episode. What is Kiira's real plan? Because even though she's saying that she wants to be in the A-cast, I feel like she has a bigger plan that's going on that we don't know about. We'll have to see really what's going on with that. That definitely is going to be very interesting. Romeo does not trust Bryan. You can tell. Romeo does not trust Bryan. He knows something is going on there. Romeo, I feel like, is really going to help out Claire here, which I definitely hope is where we're going. I like where that's headed. What's going on between Russ and Kiira? Does Russ like her, or is he simply just trying to help out Kiira? I think he's just trying to help her out. We'll have to see what's going on with that. Like I said, the thing with Mia and Bryan, I saw it coming. I thought it was really predictable, and, I knew that Mia would do something like that because she hates Claire. She doesn't want anything to do with her. But let me know what you guys saw this episode. I thought this was, like I said, my least favorite episode, but from what I've seen in episode 4, it's really great. I definitely still really enjoy it. I'm still really into the show. It wasn't a bad episode by any means. It were just a few scenes that were just a really strange, like the egg scene and the predictable stuff in this episode just wasn't as compelling as it could have been. But let me know what you guys saw this episode. I really did like it. I thought it was a really great episode. And I will see you guys next week, which will be for Scream Queens, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.